You're listening to the 4-Phase Cycle Podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of ZESTY Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the 4 phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hello, Alex here, and I'm back for day 26 of our Flowing with Your Cycle series. It is 26 out of 28. Hard to believe that we are here already, but thank you so much for joining me. Today we are going to be talking about listening. And just like all of these, there's different layers to listening because we already had a podcast episode in this series that had to do with listening internally. And there is going to be more of that we talk about here. But there's also other layers to listening that I think are going to be extra helpful for your experience of flowing with the cycle. I know that they have been for me a lot. And so that's why this is a topic for one of the days. And it's especially relevant in phase 4, where this is where we actually are living our life and appreciating and inviting opportunities for feedback about how it's going, and therefore making decisions about that integration process of the new and the old, right? Because we are close to making the transition over to phase 1 again, and we start to look forward once more, right? That's what the brain wants to do. And in phase 4, it's really all about integration. And as Megan and I go, the act of integration has become a much bigger deal. And that's part of the listening process, right? Integration is truly becoming comfortable and aligned with whatever you are becoming, usually in response to something that has happened, some decision that you make, even if it's internally, some impulse kicks off that changes our experience, and then we integrate all of that into our actual lives, right? Then this happens a lot. People do breath work or energy work or psychedelics or whatever it is that they're doing for growth. And then when that happens, a lot of times people are like, oh, cool, I did that thing, now I'm done, right? And it's this false compartmentalization of the experience is over here and my life is over on this other side, where integration now, anything that happens when we are doing it as consciously, especially, is that we choose to do something and then we integrate it into the rest of our lives. What nuggets are we taking into all the other areas of our life? Because the integration process is going to play out anyways, right? You have an event, it will leave a mark on you. But when we don't do that very intentionally, it's kind of a grab bag in terms of what you get, right? And so directing it, that's this entire conversation has been all 28 days, is how do we work with whatever is already happening so that we have both hands in the wheels and we are directing where we are going rather than sort of sitting back and then a couple months later being like, oh, that's what happened, right? And it feels very disempowering. It feels like you don't have a lot of control over your life. It feels like, well, why try? Because, whatever needs to happen is going to happen, right? There's lots and lots of ways that we can interpret that. And when we are making decisions about interpretations and therefore choosing appropriately, then when we look back, it's a different experience. It's not something that happened to you, it was a co-creative process. And that's really what it comes down to. The other part of listening and the brain is that because the brain is particularly geared for feedback and integration, it's putting pieces together of the old and new. It's an amazing time to really hone in on listening to what other people are saying. And it's not actually about them, right? Now, let me do a little caveat there. When we listen, we're certainly usually connecting with that person and are listening closely to what they're saying and, acknowledging that and all of that. I'm not suggesting that this overpower it, but I'm bringing a different side of conversations that we're having. And this is yet another layer, not something to replace good listening and connection and all of that, but there's going to be things that listening does for us and reflects back to us that is really important for our growth and expansion when we have set our sights on doing so. So there's more juice to get out of the conversations actually, right? And so it's an expansion of what we receive from that, not so much that I think that we need to make every conversation mean something about you. Okay, so that's a little bit of the caveat. In phase 4, now it's all about going inwards, right? And that's where we naturally often feel our body beginning to pump the brakes and start to slow us down. And very often we have the expectation and the conditioning that we need to keep doing stuff, keep working, staying busy, right? It's almost like a badge of honor, like, oh, I didn't take vacation last year, I was just so busy, or, oh, I didn't even have time to run to the bathroom at work or food, which, some of us do have jobs like that, and there is a difference between identifying so strongly with it that it's like something that we are proud of, which honestly, I've been there in the past with, like being an anesthesiologist and being like, oh yeah, that call was so crazy, I didn't even have this, right? I was like proud of the things that I did. And it totally shifted the focus away from me and my health and what was right for me. And it was this badge of honor I wore. So when we do phases 2 and 3, I really never have to make a pitch about doing things, right? That all of our society is geared towards that. But in phases 1 and 4, I almost have to make a case for why it's important to slow down and address some of that, because we feel the slowing down. The invitation is there, and many times because of our beliefs and expectations for ourselves, we actually power through it and miss out on the opportunity to actually integrate things into our life in a way that then becomes a more stable foundation and springboard for all of the newness that is to come. So that's why you didn't hear me making a pitch for massive action. Everyone's all over that. Here, the slowing down, that's why I'm talking about it so much. It really is important. There's more things. The body is looking for this kind of cyclical experience because there is a time and a place and a role for it. It'd be the same as like, let's skip winter and have more spring. And nature's like, yeah, like I'm cool to bloom, that's fine, but I actually need to do the full cycle to have that. And then that's the same thing that we're really experiencing. No, that analogy kind of breaks down if you live someplace where it's always warm, but you know what I mean? Like it was skipping a stage of nature. Most of us wouldn't recommend that. Skipping a stage of how we interface with ourselves, we're all like, oh yeah, definitely, I just don't want to do that. And so there's a different thing there. So listening becomes really important at these slowing down phases, because really the superpower here is the information our brain, our physiology, and our mental, emotional, and physical selves are all acquiring and bringing together. When we are constantly busy and running around, it's really hard to hear that. That's why the mental chatter, a lot of these days we've been doing things that either anchors ourselves to our body or kind of quiets our mind, gives us an opportunity to do things in a different way. Like yesterday, right? You probably had to think a lot more about carrying out the action of doing things with your non-dominant hand. Therefore, you don't have as much opportunity to be like, oh, what did I do this morning to the kids that I said I wouldn't do, or whatever? What did I eat last night? We kind of slow those down to focus. And many people are sold on this already, right? You're working on a project and you're like, I just need a break. I'm going to go take a shower. You're in the shower and you get that amazing idea. It's that same thing. And people do try to figure out kind of where did that idea come from? Was it a download? Was it a thought? There's less importance on how you received it, but rather as the receiver of it, how did it feel once you listened and actually felt into that idea, right? Because some of our very best ideas that Megan and I have come in like this, and when you pop out of that place, you stop listening and you start thinking, oh, what does that mean? How would that unfold? What do I need to do? It takes us out of that place. Whereas when an idea comes, instead of evaluating it, feeling into what it feels like in our body, like listening with our full selves, not just our brain. Now, does our brain come into it? Yes. And this is one of the things that I have really been learning recently, is that I very much identify with myself as a mind, right? Like, I love thinking, I love learning, I love philosophizing. All of that stuff is super cool. I'm very visual. Things need to make sense to me for me to feel like I have the buy-in to do them. That is a lot of times my superpower, and our superpowers can also have the flip side of them, right? So then I become prone to overthinking. So these are all things that, while I can appreciate that that is a component of me, and I can even acknowledge that is a big component of who I personally am, and yet I need to recognize that there are times and places to step back from that and really feel into, sense into, just experience an idea or information coming in and checking it across the backdrop or against the backdrop of my entire beingness. Because here's the thing, in this phase, things become louder and more clear, so it's a little easier to do this. And I know from experience, I've done this a lot, and we've worked with a lot of women. Sometimes the ideas that come in, they're not going to make all the logical sense in the world. And that's a hard one for if you fall into my category, where I like when I figure out enough things and I'm like, this makes sense. But sometimes what it looks like is you receive it, you listen with your whole being, and that's where now I've done that enough and have gotten the feedback that when I feel that peace around something, right? I let it kind of sink in and it feels good. And this is a little bit nebulous if you haven't done it, but this is why you really have to be available and willing to really experience that, because it's very magical. But it's that knowing. If you've ever, walked into a home when you're home shopping and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm home, right? It's that feeling. Or you saw that guy across the party and you're like, that's the guy, and now you're married to him, right? Or any number of things. That job feels right. Right? That's the kind of knowing. Many of us have that for things, and yet when the new thing comes up, we discount it, right? So use any experiences that you've had in the past to say, I have some evidence of this, because likely you do. Most of us have that kind of thing. I've really never talked to anyone who hasn't. And then have the opportunity to really see, what does this feel like? And your own experience is now you have something to compare it to, right? So as we're listening, we feel into it. And then from there, that's where we can decide to pursue something. If it passes the feeling good test, then when it does come time to take some action, what are small steps you can take to test out the theory, right? We can know something, but we can also say, I'm going to follow the, like an ET, the Reese's Pieces trail, right? You follow them and see what is it that happens afterwards, because that is more feedback. And you begin to learn about yourself, that listening process. We're so used to asking, right? That's like praying or begging someone or telling someone what to do or whatever. But the listening component, because we're all so busy, less of that. And it's still a learning process. We still need to get feedback, just like if you got a new job, someone's going to give you feedback on the tasks that you're doing. It's the same thing here. And we can start small with things, right? Someone's expressing to you that they need something. Let's say the kids are like, we want to go here, and they're begging, or they're asking, or however it's happening, right? And you drop that into yourself, and you're like, what does that feel? We want to go to the park. And you feel like, yes, right? You go to the park, and you go to the park, you run into a friend that you've never seen. She tells you something that you've been wondering about or invites you to a place. That's that kind of feedback. Or you get there, the park is closed, kids are crying, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be good feedback, though. We all hope it is. But when you get that feedback, then you get to really try it out. What was it that I felt? Because sometimes we can overthink something, right? But you don't know the difference between that until you are actually have your hands in the clay and you're playing with real life physicality that's giving you information. The same thing is when it comes to listening for people. It's not just kind of the things they say that we can test out, but also listening from a place of seeing everyone in our experience as our own projection. Because when it comes to integration, where the friction generally happens is old you rubbing up against new you, and you're really tussling it out to see which one are you going to stick with. That's really the question. Are you going to go back to the old way of doing things, or are you going to make decisions that integrate the old and new in a way that works for you, knowing that it's okay to have missteps along the way of figuring that out and kind of backtracking and overstepping and doing that whole dance? So then, when it comes to projections of us, as we're doing that friction rub, right, we're really experiencing that. The things that are brought up to our awareness and show up in our lives are just yet another avenue to garner information. Because the things that bug us about other people are things that are somewhere active in our bodies or emotional, mental, physical, spiritual bodies. And now you're seeing that friction play out right in front of your eyes. There's something there. The same is actually also true of really great things. This is why Megan and I don't have any sort of jealousy response when we see someone really thriving, because what we've done is really programmed in this idea consciously that if we see something happening to someone and we want it, the very act of us seeing it means that it's somewhere in proximity and within us as well, right? And that's a really cool thing, because I used to, like on Facebook, when I was really dealing with infertility and doing IVF, there's all these pregnancy announcements and cute babies and all sorts of stuff, right? And it was right in my face, and I'd see it and I'd get upset and I'd go cry in the bathroom and all of that stuff. So if you're there, I hear you, it can be really hard. The game changed drastically then when I began to see that as the projection of myself that really vibed with that concept. So now every time I see that, I'm like, yeah, that it's available to me, right? Or if we see business folks having a lot of success and reaching a lot of people, and they're, we see testimonials and customers, it's easy in the beginning to be like, oh, I want that, but that person has it. And you're kind of like, oh, why not me, right? But if it's showing up in your world, there's the opportunity to see it as some sort of mirrored to you. And when we see things that we want and we like, we celebrate. This is great. This is my projection. So we're listening from that different place of what is this showing back to me? And with that information, how does that guide my integration? How am I making choices now from this place with the new stuff I'm working on, with the old stuff I'm working on, and that feedback that I'm getting is going to, whether it's good or bad, I'm doing quotation marks because that can only be decided by you, right? If it's a good projection or a negative, like someone comes up and they're really angry. It's like, where am I angry, right? Where am I angry, and what is this anger showing me about myself? Because when someone's really angry, there's almost always a difference between an expectation that they held and what happened, right? Think about any time you got angry with someone. Probably you thought it was going to go a certain way, then it didn't, you get angry. And there's other reasons too, but this is an anger podcast. But essentially, that's the deal. If that was transmitted to you and you saw that in your, even if you didn't get angry yourself, it's just asking the question of, where do I have anger in my life? And in the act of having anger, what expectation is it now highlighting for me? See how that works? This is a really fascinating thing to do, actually all the time. It's just that our brains are primed to be extra good at doing this sort of evaluation and coming up with something that truly helps move our life forward. But really, in the grand scheme of things, especially when things pop up time and time and time again, that's when, it's very apparent, and it gives you the reminder of being like, oh wait, hold on, let me step back. Why is it that this keeps coming up for me? What is it really pointing to? And then with that, that's where the integration actually happens much faster. Like I said, the integration will happen one way or another, but when we push things away and we deny them, we're really just prolonging the time that we can integrate it into the whole of who we are as a being, right? And so with that, the allowance of it, just really listening and asking questions, it's an amazing thing. I have found that this improves my relationships over time, because instead of thinking, why is that person angry in the moment, right? It's like you're doing a little evaluation, you're recognizing that it could be present in you. And so you don't come at the person like, oh, well, why are you doing this, right? Making it about them. Then it really becomes like, okay, well, I also have to address it. What is it that I need? And that gives you the opportunity to meet that person where they're at. What is their expectation that they're not having met, that they may not even have an awareness of consciously that they had that expectation? Now they're mad, right? So yes, we are listening, and yes, we can apply it to ourselves, but I do think that whole process really does improve the entire experience for everyone, which is Megan and I's whole shtick, right? Each of us improving our experience, really coming into alignment with ourselves, creates a better world for everyone. And isn't that the whole point, right? Like, yes, it's all about us, and it's all about everybody and everything we love as well. And it really becomes magical when we have this way of living that then we know I'm doing the best thing for me, and it's the best thing for everyone on the spinning rock hurling through space, which will blow your mind if you really think about it. So I don't know if you're available for that today, but really that's the whole deal. All right, that is it for day 26. Thank you so much for joining me. These ones are so huge at the end, and I'm just so glad that you are here and that you are doing this work. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Like I said, the ripple effects get back to all of us. So much love to you. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.